The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hello there. Obi-Wan Kenobi here, also known as James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan,
Jedi Master Plo Koon,
and many other characters in the world of Star Wars. You're listening to... Shh, don't tell. It's the Secrets of Star Wars. May the Force be with you.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. From movies to books, TV shows, and more, we're looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in the Star Wars universe. And be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Wars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your favorite podcast app, or on the StarQuest YouTube channel. And you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, on X where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram where we are at StarQuest Network. And be sure to get your official Secrets of Star Wars gear at sqpn.com/merch. And I'm your host tonight, Jeff Haecker, and joining me on the panel is Kathryn Laffrey. Hi, Kathryn.
Hey, Jeff.
And the Bindu, Angela Sealana. Hi, Angela.
Hey there, Jeff.
All right, so today we are discussing Andor Season 2, Episode 12, which is the Andor series finale, Jedha, Kyber, Erso. So the plot summary first, and then we'll discuss. K2SO kills the Imperial SWAT team hunting Kleya, but Kleya is injured. They escape to Yavin, but Bail Organa grounds them for disobeying orders, and the rebel leadership is difficult to convince of the truth of the intelligence Kleya has, because of Luthen's rogue attitude. Cassian and Vel speak and toast their fallen comrades, while Kleya begins to learn how to fit in. Partagas commits suicide, and Dedra is sent to a Narkina-style prison. Meanwhile, a rebel informant in Saw Gerrera's crew contacts Yavin, and rebel leadership agrees to send Cassian to Kathryn to meet them. And the series ends with Bix on Mina Rao holding a baby and looking toward the horizon. So what was y'all's impressions of the episode? I'll start with you, Kathryn.
I wish this would have just been one continuous episode with the previous one. It would have just flowed so much better. But, you know, they did a good wrap up.
Yeah, for me, I think it was probably one of my favorites just because of all the resolution. Resolution that's not resolution, but, you know, resolution after how many years of watching this show. So that was satisfying, definitely. And I think I mentioned last week or last time that we kind of get this transition in the music from the more like techno sounding stuff and artificial sounding stuff to the orchestral music. And I was really enjoying that in this episode. So yeah, it's kind of like first impressions.
Yeah, I really love the finale here. And yeah, Kathryn, like you said, it really is kind of a part two of the episode. And I mean, when I watched it, I watched all three back to back because I have fear of missing out. So I was like, I can't wait and not watch them. So every week at 8, I would sit there and watch all 3 episodes for that 4 weeks. But yeah, it was really, it was almost a little bit anticlimactic because usually series will end with a big battle or something like that. But we all know the big battle is yet to come. So it's almost like, you know, they have a little, you know, the small kind of skirmish with the SWAT team, as I call them. And then they, you know, has to kind of have a little bit of a lull, calm before the storm of what we get in Rogue One. So, but yeah, overall, like just a great finale of the series, I think, or, you know, of the TV series, because of course there's, you know, the Rogue One, which continues the story for some of these characters. So, so yeah, we can kind of get into it. You know, we start off with the SWAT team kind of coming into the building where the safe house is, where Cassian and Melshi have come in to find Kleya. And I thought it was interesting that she doesn't want to go to Yavin at first. Like, she doesn't think she has a place there because of her, activities with Luthen, who's kind of an outcast, an outsider. So what did y'all think of Kleya's kind of reluctance to go to Yavin at first?
It is a little bit jarring, because I think as Star Wars fans, we like to think of this very simplistic view of there being the Empire and the Rebellion, and either you're on one side or you're on the other side, generally speaking. But this idea that, someone who's rebelling against the Empire wouldn't feel comfortable on Yavin is sort of jarring. I think it's meant to be, because it kind of further illustrates how Luthen and Kleya were on the fringes, in a way, of the rebellion. Even though last time we talked about how it seemed like the writers were writing this show and kind of putting Luthen at the center of the rebellion, I think this episode shows just how much they were on the fringes, that they were the outcasts or outsiders, but they were still doing important things. So yeah, I think that made it interesting, and but also that's why I personally felt while watching it like, oh gosh, that's really sad, that she doesn't feel like she has anywhere else to go.
Yeah, I got that same impression. It also felt like they, like Kleya and Luthen, probably think of themselves more like Saw Gerrera, where they're just out there, do it hard, do it fast, get the result. And so they're not quite building a new republic like the rest of the group wants to do.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting that, Angela, you said that they were not the center, but they kind of were for a lot of these events. Like, a lot of these things may not have happened without Luthen, and his code name was, or his, I guess it's what the ISB called him, was Axis, because he was kind of an axis around what a lot of these things rotated, because he's kind of the one that brought Mon Mothma into the, into a more active part of the rebellion, because she was already kind of opposing the Empire as best she could. But it was in very kind of small ways that weren't really adding up to anything, but it was really Luthen kind of dragging her in, feet first, even though she may not have wanted to, until eventually she does become kind of the main. I mean, they're a council of, the Rebel Alliance leadership, but she is kind of the, the head of the council, and she may not have gotten there without Luthen. And they even say in this episode, which I have notes on later, that, without Luthen, Mon wouldn't have gotten to Yavin, because he's the one that sent Cassian to get her. So yeah, I thought it was interesting, and yeah, sad for Kleya, because after all the stuff they've done, she feels like she doesn't actually belong with the rebellion. Like, she kind of had the same attitude of Luthen, as they really don't, they just want to just defeat the Empire. They don't really care or have, they don't really think beyond that. Whereas, Mon and the rebels on Yavin are kind of thinking beyond that, and like they're trying to restore the Republic. They're the Alliance to restore the Republic, rather than just fighting the Empire for fighting's sake. So, but yeah, I'm ultimately, Cassian does and Melshi do convince her that she needs to go and pass on this intelligence. And I thought it was kind of interesting, because the chain of messages, because a few episodes ago was called The Messenger, and Cassian has become kind of a part of the chain of messages to get this intelligence to Yavin, and then eventually later in Rogue One kind of is the one to bring, Jyn into the fold to ultimately lead to getting the Death Star plan. So, but as they're trying to escape, of course, the SWAT team is coming in, but our guy K2 manages to step in, and that's kind of the only action scene you get of his stopping of them. But what did y'all think of K2's intervention here?
I like that he was smart enough to shut down communications with ISB headquarters. He is super still, cutthroat nasty, though. I mean, he picked up that officer and used him as a shield when we already saw that these blaster bolts deflect off of him. He didn't really need the shield. That was just, I was like, wait, why? Why is he doing that besides just grim? Yeah, so that was interesting. It was also interesting, too, to notice that the head of the SWAT team, the real gruff fella, has a black band on his shoulder. So it made me wonder, what else was he involved in that he's wearing a black band on his shoulder armor?
Yeah. I don't know. I just thought it was fun. I just had fun with it. I was thinking about the relationship between K2 and Cassian, and I guess it's just been has it been a year since they met at this point? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
because he got him from Gorman, which was the last set of episodes. So it's just developing still, and you can see that K2. I mean, even in Rogue One, K2 feels like not valued enough at the beginning of the movie. So K2 is definitely, he's like a kid. He comes off as a child and in the best way because he has such a huge body as well. So it's almost like it's kind of like the Wookiee to Han Solo, you know, kind of a similar vibe of just like this childish big thing that, you know, is sort of silly, but also is a terrifying death machine, you know? So, yeah. No, I love the scene too. And using the guy as a meat shield, because they, you know, the SWAT team's coming in, they throw a stunner in, and, you know, they would be captured if K2 didn't show up. So, you know, he's showing he's a needed part of the team. And yeah, I think Cassian too in his mind is probably like, you know, he had a droid friend growing up in B2, and so he's, you know, probably has that in mind that, you know, he has a new droid friend now, and it's kind of his sidekick. And I do hope eventually we get some books or something in between these episode arcs that show kind of the friendship or, you know, the relationship developing between them from his activation at the end of the last arc to the, you know, in between this set of episodes, because we see him hanging out with Melshi and playing that tile game in the last episode. And, you know, there's a relationship there, and I hope we get to see something about that, you know, more developed in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they managed to escape Coruscant and, you know, get in their ship and fly away. And this mission was unauthorized, so I thought it was interesting when they're coming back to Yavin. They're saying, like, we have I forget exactly what they say, something coming in unauthorized or coming in hot, and they're not sure if they're going to be what kind of reception they're going to get. So, and then of course they land, and then they're immediately kind of taken into, you know, put under house arrest basically. So, and then they're brought to the council. What did y'all think of that scene of Cassian and being brought to the council of the rebel leadership?
Well, a little bit before that. So a little bit before that, we see Saw talking to Mon Mothma, and I found that to be more and more important as the episode went on, rewatching it, because I realized that as we were just discussing, Saw and Luthen were purposely not uniting themselves with the rest of the rebellion on Yavin. And I think at least we know that Saw is very paranoid. For Luthen, I think it was intentional that he didn't want the rest of the rebellion to be endangered if he had been discovered, or if something had been compromised in his grand scheme. He seemed to be very conscious of the fact that he was so close to the enemy in a way, that, you know, it was very possible for him to be discovered. And so to see then Saw talking to Mon Mothma, then later on in the episode, seeing the fact that Tivik, who was with Saw, was a contact with Saw, is the one that's sending the messages for Cassian. It just all kind of comes together in this sort of scene. And but to see how they're talking about Luthen and not acknowledging the sacrifices that he's made, I think that was also, like I said, very intentional. And I don't think that I don't think he really cared what the other people in the rebellion thought about him. But yet he was doing everything that he was doing for the good of the rest of the rebellion in his mind anyway. So I think that's partially why Cassian is very offended, because even though, like he says, he knows the good and the bad of Luthen, I guess he realizes that, yeah, ultimately they need to at least respect his name. They need to at least, and I'm sure that's very difficult for some from the other standpoint, right? Of all the other senators who don't really know anything about the good stuff, I guess, that Luthen has done, but Cassian has seen it.
Yeah, you can definitely tell Cassian's trying to let them see through his eyes what he saw in Luthen, so that was good. And it was interesting to just see how, because of the way Luthen operated, it did create a barrier where there was a lack of trust. And so that made it really hard to bring across important information, because he was so just out there with the way he operated, especially, even Mon did not trust him completely with everything that he had done, even though he was part of helping rescue her. There was, always that kind of standoff from him. And even Cassian admitted, I chose you guys. I get what he's done and how he's done it, but I chose you guys. So, he's a good bridge, I think. But it was sad to see that they weren't accepting everything Cassian had done to be able to trust what Cassian was saying. He's getting reliable information. He's been providing reliable information. So the fact that they don't trust Luthen, fine. They should at least be trusting Cassian. He's proven himself.
Yeah, I think part of that, though, is the intelligence is coming from Luthen. So while they trust Cassian, they don't necessarily trust the source that's telling him that. But yeah, I really like that scene, too, of Cassian, because his relationship with Luthen has been kind of back and forth throughout the whole show. He brought him in initially as to be on the Aldhani heist, and then he was going to kill him, and then he brings him in, and then, they have back and forth this season, too. But yeah, in Cassian, like y'all said, he sees the good and the bad in Luthen, so he kind of has the best picture of who Luthen is and whether he's trustworthy or not. But they're not acknowledging that he basically gave up everything for the rebellion, and ultimately his life, to prevent them from getting, because he tried to kill himself so that they couldn't torture him for information, and then Kleya had to be the one to go in and finish that, because he didn't die before they got him to the hospital. So, but yeah, it kind of goes back to his big speech in season 1 where he says, "What if I sacrificed everything?" Because he did ultimately give everything for the rebellion, even though if his methods weren't always the best. He still, just everything he did was kind of for that goal, and he did. And Cassian does point out that he was the one who sent Cassian to get Mon Mothma out of Coruscant, since her team was compromised. So yeah, I like that they're kind of still questioning it, because it just kind of sets up some tension. But throughout the episode, you get the sprinkles of Tivik calling into Yavin and trying to reach Cassian. So they're like, can we trust what Cassian's saying? But they also, at the same time, there's they're getting some information from a bunch of sources that there's something going on. So
it's building a sense of urgency.
Right. Yeah. because this is like 2 days before the events of Rogue One, and then just a couple days more, and it's the Battle of Yavin, which is kind of the big turning point in the rebellion. So, but yeah, after that kind of council meeting, they Monson meets up with Vel, who's on Yavin as well still, and gets her to meet up with Cassian to try to kind of get a sense of what, because she knows Luthen as well. So I thought it was, it's interesting that they're still kind of they still have a relationship. Of course they're cousins, but they're still, even she's just kind of a lowly duty officer, and Mon's kind of leader of the rebellion, but they're still meeting up and having meals together. And so I like that Mon is still kind of maintaining that family connection, since she's, we don't know what happens to her daughter at this point or beyond, because she hasn't been mentioned again in any of the books or anything. So, Vel could be the last relative that she has any relationship with. So, but what did y'all think of this scene? And unless y'all had anything on that, because that was just kind of a brief scene, I was going to move to Cassian and Vel's kind of conversation and a toast to the fallen, which I thought was a really, really cool, really powerful scene to kind of go back and think of everyone that they've met and worked with, and everyone that they've lost so far. So what did y'all think of that conversation?
For me, I was struck by Mon's plea to Vel. She says, "Help me believe him." And for some reason, I made in my brain the connection between, it's almost like every Yavin leader is the Apostle Thomas, like after the resurrection. It's like, they just don't want to believe this news that is really, really big and important, and somebody died for. I guess that's why my brain went there. But, Vel is obviously still deeply hurt by her life working for Luthen. And she's still now, she almost, I don't know if she appreciates Mon asking her to spy or not. She's like, I'm supposed to spy on him. And that was kind of one of her jobs, working for Luthen. So I don't know if she is just sort of over all that, but she does it. And it's kind of a nice summary of the entire Andor series, because we hear all the different fallen, as you said, Jeff, throughout, the series. We have seen all these people sacrifice themselves, and it's all sort of coming down to this moment now. And their relationship between Vel and Cassian is like friends, they're fellow soldiers. I mean, they've seen life and death together. So you can really see Cassian as this rounded character, this truly rounded character at this moment, I think. Because, before this, he was visiting Kleya in the infirmary, and he was saying, "I'm doing everything that I can, I promise." Whereas, he had just a year before said that he was done. He was just done with everything. He was done, and he was going to move on. And now he's doing everything that he can. And so, it's like a whole 180, or however you want to put that in numeric terms. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was refreshing, too, to see that even though Mon had asked Val to spy on him, she right away tells Cassian. She wants to know, so it's like, okay, you can get that there's a definite trust between the two of them because of everything they've been through, and they've both seen the good and the bad of Luthen.
Yeah, and I like that. I like this conversation too. They're toasting their fallen, and yeah, we get to go through everybody's, and some of them, even though I'd watched season 1 again before season 2, like some of the names I had forgotten. And I like too that a little bit later on we get to hear Nemik's manifesto playing, because that was a big part of, I think that was a big influence on Cassian of actually kind of eventually joining up with the rebellion. And, because he was initially in it just to get off of Ferrex and get some money. But but then after his experience in the prison, and then, and I think that with Nemik's manifesto kind of got him into actually working with Luthen for the rebellion. So yeah, I really like that scene. And I don't think he said Skeen, which was the character that was going to try to take the money and run with Cassian. He was kind of only in it for the money, and whereas everyone else was kind of in it for the rebellion for one reason or another. So so Skeen got left off, and then of course they mentioned Cinta, who unfortunately passed away a couple arcs ago. But yeah, and then we kind of move into, like, we already mentioned Kleya kind of not really feeling like she fits in here, and because she didn't want to come because she didn't think she or Luthen really had a place. But I think this was a nice scene of her, coming out of the infirmary and eventually meeting up with Vel, and they're kind of in their conversation. I think it's kind of her finding acceptance and finding a place here, where before it was just her and Luthen kind of isolated, and they were working together, but there wasn't really, I think we've talked about before throughout the season, there wasn't really much love there, or really any kind of, like, they were working together, they had a common goal, and there was, maybe as best they could, they had a relationship, but it wasn't a real healthy relationship for a lot of it. So I thought it was nice that Kleya, Vel kind of tells her she can find a place here if she wants. But
yeah, she uses that phrase. I have friends everywhere, and I think she uses that phrase to help Kleya feel comfortable, because that's a phrase that she knows is supposed to be a safe word, in a way, and telling her that she's here with friends. But honestly, I don't know if Kleya really knows what a friend is. I don't think that she's had any since her young childhood, because Luthen as sort of, he was a friend, but he also wasn't. He definitely cared for her. He definitely wanted to take care of her and keep her safe, but he was also a loose cannon. So he did a lot of things that did put them in danger, and he kind of didn't care about all the rest of the people being expendable that worked for him in a certain sense. He had to kind of be free of that. So does she really know what a friend even is, even though that was the safe word, for her and Luthen and their operation? I thought that was interesting. So I don't know what you think about that. If you think about,
it felt like Vel was slowly undoing what Luthen had done to her in the beginning. So I was glad you brought her up as a child, because this is almost paralleling her being found again. So now she's being found by people that will literally be her friend and not just use her for her skills to get to what they want. I think that there'll be definitely more of a caring, real friendship for her with people within the Alliance.
Yeah, and the way that they sort of show her journey on Yavin visually, I was noticing that when she's in the infirmary and she wakes up, she gets up, she's like shrouded in this shadow. There's darkness. And as the scenes progress, there's more and more little bits of light that sort of come through. And then when she's going out in the rain, and Vel has this lamp and meets her and gives her a garment and walks beside her, to me, I was like, it's baptism.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because it's like, yes, she's being washed clean.
Yeah, all the rain was on her, and she was just stumbling around looking for light, and then here comes this light out of the darkness. So it was very baptismy to me as a Catholic.
Oh, new word.
Baptismy, yes.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because this Sunday that we're recording this is when we hear the parable of the Good Samaritan too. So that's something in mind too, that she received healing where she thought she would get none from almost from a different tribe, like 'cause she was kind of an outcast with Luthen and never thought she could have a place. Because I think y'all are right that she, like, her and Luthen were just they were just kind of using each other, even if they were close at times. And I think that ultimately they were just like Luthen was using her and would give her up if it meant a step further in destroying the Empire. And I think Kleya would have done the same. Like, she's ultimately did, I think she did care for him, of course, because when, she was very sad when she had to unplug his life support to keep him from, potentially giving up Yavin to the Empire and whatnot. But yeah, I think, that was an interesting scene too with her and Vel. And I have it on here later, but I guess I might talk about it now. Do y'all think that Vel and Kleya will show up in something else, like in the Mandoverse or something? I kind of think they might, since we don't know their fate after this, after this show, because of course they're not in Rogue One and they haven't been in any future books or anything yet. So I don't know. I just had a thought of, like, I could definitely see them showing up, and I kind of like the idea of them working for the rebellion and fighting for the rebellion throughout the entire war until they the Empire's defeated. And I hope that they get to Kleya eventually does get a happy ending, and eventually is she can live a real life free of Luthen, free of because she's been in the fight kind of like Cassian since she was a child. So I don't know. Just the thought I had of, I don't know if y'all think they'll show up in anything down the road.
I don't know, but it would
show up.
Yeah, it would be cool. But I also, a big part of me just wants Kleya to just, like, I don't know, find some cave somewhere on Yavin and just, like, just become one with the Force or something. Like, she just needs...
Just not the cave with the haunted Sith.
No, not that one. But she, I feel so terrible for her. She's done so much for, in a sense, for other people, also for herself. I think she's been driven by so much anger her whole life. I think she was angry as a child, and that sort of plays out in some of the episodes we see here. And now she has to, I think, find a different way to express that than all the ways that Luthen sort of taught her how to fight. She has to learn a new way to fight for what she cares about. And she has to find things to care about too. So, yeah, it would be cool, but I just want her to heal.
Yeah, just let her step away from work for a while, please.
Yeah. I just knowing how they'll, there's probably enough going on in those shows. They probably don't need to bring them in, but I think it would be cool if they show up and are just, even if they're working in Mon Mothma's office as the chancellor or something, helping her out. I think it would be cool to see them again and know that they're still out there. But, or if not in Ahsoka season 2 or anything, eventually in, like, books or something, we get more. Like, I just want books of all these, like, more of these characters, because they're just so interesting, and we still don't know much about a lot of them. So, and then we just to kind of go back to the ISB, because I don't remember the exact sequence but I think the ISB stuff was kind of more toward the end and kind of one main sequence. But I thought it was interesting that were playing Nemik's manifesto, and that Partagas was listening to it, kind of knowing that he's going to be held responsible for this fiasco of losing access, losing what happened in the apartment building or whatever where they got away. So what did y'all think of Partagas's, like, kind of final scenes here?
Well, before we talk about his final scenes, just you mentioned something about them getting away. I have to say, Imperial traffic control is terrible. That unauthorized ships can just fly in and off of the capital city so easily. I'm like, come on. But anyway.
It worked in our favor.
I know, it did. It worked in their favor, which Yeah, we didn't have time for a shootout for them to get off the planet, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure they had like a cover, cover identity for the ship or whatever. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I had that thought too. Like they're just fly away, and the Imperial ships just let them go. Don't even try to stop them.
It was great to hear the manifesto again, and especially the parts where we were talking about just that rebellion will happen. It's gonna spark. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen all over the place, because what the Empire is trying to do is just impossible to keep going. And I almost felt like he was like, yep, I think he at that point in time wished he could join the rebellion. But it was sad. And it's like, I knew it was coming. As soon as he said, let me collect my thoughts, I was like, oh, this is going to be like in Shawshank when the Warden takes himself. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, it was like, oh, yeah.
So I was wondering, because I've heard other people talk about this episode, and they did not get the sense that Partagas was considering the veracity of the manifesto, but that was my impression, was that he was kind of he was pondering it. He was sort of turning it over in his mind and his heart, because he was asking the other guy that came in for him, it just keeps spreading, doesn't it? What do you think of it? He was, if he didn't believe it, then he wouldn't. He had no reason to ask those questions, really, other than considering whether what was being said was true. And again, it reminded me, from a Christian perspective, of the early Christians, right? Like how the gospel spread, and that, we're just wondering like how many of the Roman leaders really could hear anything, any of the message, and wonder, is this true or not? But one of the interesting things about this scene, I don't think it was written from a Christian perspective, partially because the theme that Nemik is talking about is freedom. And I think, in a sense, Partagas's suicide is written to look like a heroic act, like he's taking back his freedom from the oppressor, right? Like he has the freedom to kill himself in a way. And so he clearly wasn't willing to be a martyr. Like he had nothing to fight for at the end, which is sad. He knew that the Imperial superiors were going to turn on him when he failed to do his job. And that's what he was talking to Ben Mendelsohn about earlier, that, good luck to both of us, So he knew what kind of a system he was in. And that's sort of the tragedy of it all.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that too about Krennic, because of course in Rogue One, Krennic is, he's been in charge of the Death Star project, and then it just gets taken away from him within a matter of minutes by Tarkin. Like we've talked before on this podcast, but any kind of fascism or dictatorship will, like, if you serve it, it'll eventually, when you're no longer needed, it'll chew you up and spit you out, and we see that too with Dedra, that we'll talk about too in a second. But yeah, Partagas was an interesting character. Not a character you're not supposed to like him, because of course he's he's in charge of torturing people and all this evil stuff. But he was an interesting character to have throughout the series. And again, I would like to get more on him in future books and stuff, like, because their whole kind of cat and mouse game between even though it was kind of Dedra in charge of the Axis desk for a while, his ultimate enemy was kind of Partagas, because he was in charge of this, I guess, division of the ISB. I think Yularen was ultimately in charge of the ISB, if I'm not mistaken, but Partagas was kind of in charge of this branch of it, at least. So I thought it was, but hearing Nemik's manifesto kind of over that was interesting. And kind of wondering if maybe he is kind of realizing that he's made mistakes, and we don't know his story. Like I said, he could have been kind of forced into this and just kind of, like has happened throughout history. From a young age, you get brought up in a system and it's all like kind of like that's kind of what Dedra was. I think she was brought up in the system and had no, real basis for morality. And so she just served it her whole life. So, but yeah, and then we kind of, unless you'll anything else on that, we kind of move into kind of a final montage of some of the characters we've come to know throughout the series. We get a shot of Perrin, so we get one more scene of Perrin, but he's not doing very well with hanging out with with Davos Golden's wife, one of his in-laws. And
he drinks from her cup. That was so symbolic. It's just like just accepting everything that I think that it's like he doesn't. What is he? Well, you could probably interpret it in many different ways, but my first impression of that act of just taking her cup and just finishing the rest of it was sort of like, oh, well, this is my life now. I'm in this, and I guess I better enjoy it as much as I can. I don't know.
It makes you wonder what happened to him after the second Death Star exploded and Mon comes back and it's like, really? What jail did she send him off to?
Well, and from what I've read or heard, in some of the early scripts, there were actually scenes written where he talked with Mon and kind of knew about all of her activities, and he was kind of covering for her. And like, because I think in some of the there's a book that I've talked about, the Mask of Fear, Reign of the Empire, Mask of Fear, kind of about the early days of the Empire. That is canon within the Disney canon, and where Mon is picked up by the ISB, and I think they also question Perrin and stuff too. So yeah, I think I like the idea that he was doing his part as best he could, even if it was in a very limited way, to kind of cover for Mon, and yeah, but ultimately he's left seemingly with, he kind of has that. See, he's always been kind of a rich boy, idle rich guy that doesn't really contribute anything other than parties and stuff, and ultimately seems like he's not doing very well, and we don't know, like we don't know where their kids are, where Leda is, if I'm assuming she's probably okay, but because I feel like they would have said something, but maybe we'll see Leda and I think Stekken was her husband's name now, but yeah, we get that final send off to Perrin. It was, I thought it was a fun character, kind of, a jerk in a lot of ways, but I thought he was fun to watch, at least, especially this season with the whole wedding thing with the Sigrona toast and all that.
I mean, he and Mon never got along on screen, really, in this series, so it was very easy to not like him. If in fact there is some storyline, as you're describing, that he stood up for her, they certainly did not show that at all in this series. So I would be curious to see if anyone tries to retcon and put things together. But yeah, I was fine with not liking him at all.
And then one of the other shots we see is Krennic kind of overseeing the final steps of the Death Star, which we did kind of see the final touches in Rogue One, but this is like 2 days before that, so we get to see his kind of final shot, and presumably the last time we'll ever see Krennic in anything, because of course he doesn't make it out of Rogue One. And then I thought,
anyone else feel like it was kind of behind schedule, the Death Star? I mean, I was like, there's just days away from everything that happens in Rogue One. It's like, did they actually use it then? It doesn't seem like it's ready.
Well, he kept saying in Rogue One that they were almost ready. So, it was still, I think it was like just ready to do the test on Jedha when they do it. So, yeah, I mean, a little bit, but hey, who knows? maybe those bots or droids or whatever they're using to build the Death Star are super duper fast.
Well, and I think too, and there was kind of a prequel book to Rogue One called, I believe it's called Catalyst, where it kind of talks about Galen Erso and his wife. I forget, I think Lyra Erso. Yeah. Kind of in the early stages of construction, and there's some interludes where Krennic is writing memos to Galen during the Death Star of like, this is you're taking too long. You're like, don't worry about this, do this. And so I think Galen was too like trying to delay it as long as possible, and so you could kind of build in the ultimate failsafe that they use. So, in Rogue One we kind of see the final like the dish kind of being put in, and then it's ready to go. So, and I thought this was kind of an interesting part of this montage is we see Melshi running with a squad, and it's a lot of the same characters that go to Scarif. I don't know if it's all of them, but there's that one alien guy who was there. There's a couple aliens that do, but there was the one who was kind of with them on that assault. So I thought that was cool to see, Melshi in charge of the squad of people who are, ultimately going to, or at least some of them are ultimately going to go to Scarif to, try to get the Death Star plans. Not much there other than a visual, because this is kind of, Cassian's been tasked by, we kind of skipped saying this, but Bail kind of came to tell Cassian, you got this call from your contact, and, we're authorizing you to go talk to him and see what's going on, because they're getting, like we said, they're getting hints of all this different bits of intelligence here and there about this super weapon. So
that particular scene, Jeff, for me, what stood out was that he was dreaming about his sister, right before he woke up. Yeah. And I was wondering what your thoughts were from you two about why the writers felt it was important to show that he was dreaming about her at this point. Like, for me, it reminded me of how in Rogue One, when he's defending himself, he says, I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old. I think it's 6 years old. And it's sort of like maybe the seed that was planted in his heart for the rebellion, that now before he goes off on this big mission, like this is what he's dreaming of. I wonder if he always dreams about her, like every single night, if that's what he dreams. So I was curious if y'all had any thoughts on that.
Other than the fact it reminded me that ever since the show started, I'm like, when are you going to get to his sister?
Because that's what they started. Maybe that's why, because they started the series with him looking for his sister, and then at the end, he's still dreaming about her.
The biggest unresolved mystery of this whole show.
Yeah.
When is she going to show up, please? I really wanted to see the sister.
Yeah, I think it. I think it kind of made sense that they don't show her, because it's almost like the galaxy is a huge place, and if you lose track of somebody, it can be really hard to find them, especially once they're off your planet and into, on these thousands or, millions of other planets they could go to. So I didn't mind that they never resolved that story. And I thought it was kind of interesting because it kind of shows Cassian going from, initially missing his sister, and then he has his mom and his, and then his adoptive parents and Marva and Clem. And then he kind of has his family in Ferrix, and then eventually finds this family on Yavin made up of, because Luthen wasn't, when he was part of Luthen's cell, he really didn't really seem like much of a family between everybody. But when he got to Yavin, he still had all these people that he knew. So, but yeah, I thought it was, and yeah, Bail says, do you sleep well? No. Do you ever sleep well? No. Yeah, and Bail also, I did not even include this in my notes, but yeah, Bail talks about, he's fighting for Leia, for his daughter and his family. So, they all kind of they're all fighting for somebody. And I thought that was interesting to kind of connect Cassian and Bail in that way, because they're very different characters and they have the same goals ultimately, but, one's a senator who's still kind of in the Senate and kind of pretending, and one isn't, in the military, So, and then as part of the final montage, we see we see the Force healer one more time as Cassian's walking, and they kind of share a knowing look, and it just makes me think of, like, I think I talked about this when we were in that episode, where they meet the Force healer, that she kind of got a vision of him doing something important, and even if she didn't know exactly what it was, and that's what kind of led Bix to, now we know that, of course, Bix left because she was pregnant, and if Cassian knew, then he would never, leave her side. So, but I thought it was interesting they shared that look, and, because we, of course, know he's about to go on to his last mission of getting Jyn and then getting the Death Star plans ultimately. So, I hope we see the Force healer again, because it's kind of one of the only Force things we got in this show. And I hope that we get more references to that in something, even if it's not the same character, but then he and Cassian get in their ship and fly off to Kathryn, which is where Rogue One picks up. So it's almost like right where right where one ends, the next one picks up. And I don't know if y'all did, but as soon as Andor ended, I was like ready to watch Rogue One. I think I waited a week and I rewatched this episode and then immediately started Rogue One. So,
I think it was the same in our house, like about a week, and then we were like, okay, we'll watch Rogue One.
Yeah,
I didn't.
But can I just say, I really, during that final montage, you see him walking through the base, and there's all these people just going about their day, and you see Kleya smiling, and Dedra looks lost, and Saw is looking at Jedha City, and it's just like, I want someone on YouTube to take that sequence and put the circle of life from The Lion King, like, behind it. It's just like, because it just felt like that's what could also fit into that. It's just like the Star Wars circle of life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we also see Mon having breakfast with Vel and, like, hanging out with, like, the troops and stuff, which I thought was really cool. It's like she's not in the military, she's not a fighter, but she's showing leadership, and, like, we talked about when she fled Coruscant, and I talked about that Rebels episode that she gives her speech and that kind of unites the Alliance, and, like, she's fighting in her way, and she's is leading the rebellion at this point, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was cool that we kind of get her hanging out with the troops. Like, she's not super up on a pedestal or anything.
Yeah. And
then we kind of end. We end the series with them flying off, and then we cut to Mina Rao, where we see Bix and baby Cassian, or he or she, we don't know. But what did y'all think of that final bit? Did y'all? I can't remember if you did, Kathryn, but did y'all predict that Bix was pregnant when she left?
No, not me.
Yes. Actually, my husband called it out before I did. He was just, oh yeah, she's pregnant. That's why she's leaving. It's like, oh, okay, really? I mean, I all along thought she was going to die to really throw Cassian over the edge. Having that, the only thing I did not like was that she went back to the planet where you lost, was it Basso?
Brasso.
Yeah. And then, her huge almost rape trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And Val obviously knows where she is. Cassian's like, she's safe. I'm like, that was the place you rescued her from, took her away from, because it was overrun by the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
The Empire's where right now? I mean, it's just, I don't know. I did not like that quick change like that, because there was no fight for that planet.
Mm.
And they were being used for their resources. So I'm just kind of like, okay. That's the only thing I didn't like, is like, when I saw where she was, I'm like, she's not safe there. The Empire's still there. So, yeah.
I guess I didn't bump on it really. I just assumed, like, the Empire's, they have bigger fish to fry at this point, because that was in like 4 BBY when that was happening, and since then we've had all the stuff in Rebels, like, and the different cells have kind of become active and fighting the Empire. So I think they've got bigger fish to fry, and they probably have an Imperial presence on the planet, but they're not like locking it down like they used to, because they're trying to get ready for the Death Star too. So I think they've got just more going on, and they probably left that planet alone, which is why she, I assume she probably went other places first and eventually ended up there. But I guess I didn't bump on that, but I thought it was kind of nice that she ended up in kind of a, seemingly a peaceful farming planet. I'm glad she didn't go to Alderaan or somewhere we know that isn't safe. But yeah, I don't know if y'all know, but I've seen speculation that this baby is actually Poe Dameron, but it's not, because Poe Dameron his mom was a pilot in the rebellion, so it's not Poe Dameron the baby, but that is a cool theory. And I do like to think that the baby grows up to fight in the Resistance, in the sequels. So maybe we'll get a reference there to, someone named Andor or something. But and then we also had Willman survive. We didn't really get much of Willman in this episode, but he made it and was still on Yavin. So hopefully he's around too eventually. But I don't know if y'all have any kind of predictions or any thoughts on these survivors that we know will that we don't know their fates of, because we know some will move on past Rogue One, but some do not. So I think Willman, Bixen, Vel, and Kleya are kind of the main ones that we don't know their ultimate fates. But we already kind of talked about Vel and Kleya, but I don't know if y'all had any thoughts on Willman or Bix or what happens with them down the road.
Well, at least Will was with the same girl as the episode before, so he's learned something. Either that or she's the one who gave him the limp. I'm not sure. So.
Yeah, Will is still pretty young. I mean, poor guy. He's seen a lot. All those people have probably on Yavin been through a lot in their life. So I sure hope that they live, but it's not necessarily realistic to believe that, because we've seen all the Star Wars movies. We know how many people, how many pilots, how many, folks that are just in the trenches, how many of them have to leave us. So, but as far as these particular ones that you've mentioned, I think it's nice, like we were saying before, it's nice to think that some of them would live on to see the peace past all the war, but it would also be nice to hear that they ended up, sacrificing themselves, just like Cassian ends up doing. It is sort of tragic, even more tragic now that we know that Bix had a son, that Cassian had a son, that he ends up dying. But at the same time, that's what he wanted to give himself for. I don't know if he would have ever been able to just let go of the fight, because he said he had been fighting since he was 6 years old. A lot of people who grow up in that sort of environment, it like rewires your nervous system. It's just that is just you. Now you are a fighter, and you have to have a fight. So I'm happy to know that at least Cassian, even though he didn't know it, he had a wife and a son to fight for and give his life for, and hopefully they saw a good end. But well, I guess that is yet to be seen. I almost don't want there to be like a little kid Andor character, like in some, Star Wars animation for YouTube or something. But I don't know, maybe if they write it really, really well, and, if the character's really cool, then maybe I'll be okay with it. I kind of want the Andors to just kind of settle down and be anonymous in the rest of the galaxy now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, any final thoughts on this episode or the series of Andor, since we're at the end of it.
Nope, time to watch Rogue One now.
I'm ready for my 5th, 6th watching of Rebels.
Yeah, I will say if you've not watched Rebels, like watching this, because this year I've rewatched all of canon, all the Disney or all of the Star Wars canon stuff, and watching Andor and Rebels kind of side by side in the same time period was really cool because you can kind of see the events happening. And there's a few touch points, like I said, that one Rebels season 3 episode with Mon Mothma is one of them. So awesome. Yeah, and just to wrap up, I love the series, I love the season and this episode, and I'll probably won't rewatch it for a while because I watched it all as soon as it was coming out, and then I watched each episode week to week with for the podcast. So probably give it some time, but I'm sure next year I'll be like watching it all again. So, and then our listeners might be wondering what's next for the podcast. So in the near future, we will be covering Andor season 3, aka Rogue One, as we kind of reference, in kind of a retrospective with all the context of Andor. And then after that, more episodes discussing the galaxy far, far away. So that is it for this episode of The Secrets of Star Wars and our coverage of Season 2 of Andor. We'd like to take a moment to thank all of our patrons who make this show possible, including Joshua S., Jeff S., Catherine O., Father Brian Z., and Dalton H. Their generous donations help us to create The Secrets of Star Wars and all the shows here at StarQuest, and you can join them at sqpn.com/give. And now we'd like to hear from you, our listeners. What do you think of this episode of Andor and the entire series? You can let us know by sending us an email at starwars@sqpn.com, on our social media pages, or by leaving a comment on our channel on the StarQuest Discord server, which you can find at sqpn.com/discord. So until next time, thank you, Kathryn Laffrey, for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Wars.
Thank you, Jeff.
And thank you, Angela Sealana, as well.
Thanks, Jeff. It's been a pleasure.
And once again, I'm Jeff Haecker. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy. The Secrets of Sacred Art. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at starquest.fm/art.